Let me tell you about Meter, the company rethinking network infrastructure from the ground up. Tired of juggling multiple vendors and fragmented tools? Meter delivers a complete networking stack, hardware, software, and services, all integrated to give network engineers the deep control and visibility you need. Thanks for Meter for making this possible. Go to meter.com/NAN to book a demo now. That's meter.com/NAN. Hello and welcome to the Network Automation Nerds podcast, where we explore the latest in network automation from a practitioner's perspective. I'm your host, Eric Chou, a network engineer who loves everything about network automation. Today's episode is a special milestone episode 100. Joining me today is my special co-host, Chou Conry-Murray from the Packet Pushers team. He needs no introduction, I'm sure. And together, we're going to take a journey back to almost 5 years of this journey with almost 100 conversations with network automation practitioners, pioneers, and visionaries. And also we have, some of the listeners who decided to join us today who will be, chatting in. So we'll, from time to time, going back into the chat interface, answering questions, and be a interactive episode. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and get started. First of all, welcome, Chou. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. I'm honored to be here to help you celebrate 100 episodes, and it really is a milestone. Folks who might listen to podcasts kind of may have the impression that it's folks just get on a mic and talk, but they don't necessarily understand all of the work that goes into making something look easy. So 100 episodes, particularly on your own, is an achievement.
Yeah, that was me, right? Like, I laugh because when you say folks are just like, that was my initial impression, to just like hop on a mic and talk. And so I definitely learned a lot during the journey, whether that's just doing it on my own, getting a hosting provider, or even doing transition or moving from doing my own to joining a bigger, I would say family, and I don't say that term lightly, but I really do feel it's a great team and it's family-ish. Well, how about that? I would say.
I think family-ish is good. Yeah. We won't come to your house for Thanksgiving, but family-ish, yeah.
Hey, but you're welcome to come to my house for Thanksgiving, except we don't celebrate Thanksgiving. You might have to bring your own faux turkey or your turkey or whatever you celebrate it with, Yeah, cool.
So I guess the big question then is, like, as you said, what was your motivation to do this? And when did you start?
So it's kind of funny that you mentioned it, because I started back in 2017. I remember back then it was not a lot of service provider, like full service hosting provider for podcasts. So I went on this website called Podcast Answerman. And last time I checked, I think he was still has those video up, and it was a very convoluted process. You actually have to do like local recording on the audio, and then you have to create some kind of XML file. You have to put it into like a free storage, like S3 buckets or something like that, and then you have to use a XML file to tell like the meta tags and for people to get to know it. It was like a 5-step process just to get the first episode up and running. Wow. And it took me so much work that I just chickened out for the next thing, whatever that year was, chickened out till I believe it was 4 more years that I decided to just pick it up again. And to my surprise, because of I think it was one of the few good things that COVID brought was, like the rise of podcasts and come with the audience. Obviously, a lot of startup that came with it. So one of the startup was a Buzzsprout. I mean, there are others, but Buzzsprout was like this full service provider that you could just simply upload an audio file, and made it so much easier to like, you don't have to worry about the meta tag. You don't have to worry about like a landing page where they have like the subdomain that's searchable through episodes. And so they became a full service platform where it was easy to do. And I decided to give it another shot. And so that was like the technical part. But the more like the mental part was, I also thought things have changed so much from 2017. Just one example was, I think back in 2017, people were still wondering whether network automation was a thing. A lot of people thought it was a fad. People were talking about, whether to use Python or Perl or, something else, or Bash script was good enough. So I think that landscape had changed so much between 2017 to, 2021. It's worth going over again and document these changes, both in technology as well as people's journey. That's another thing that the motivation, probably like the second biggest motivation, almost on par with the technology, is that throughout the years, because of my engagement with the community, I get to talk to a lot of cool people, and I thought we got to document this, right? It's almost like when I talk, when I talk to Ethan, to you, after I published my book, we actually recorded a few episodes with with Ethan, and I believe I also chatted with you as well. Was just like, even off the mic, we talk about our path, our journey, our mindset, what got you, to over the hump on, say, CCIE, test, or what got you to get started from network automation. People saw the end result, but to me, the path, the journey is always more interesting, and I wanted to document that. And so I wanted to have a representation in the podcast world, and so that's how I got started.
So this was 2021, and you felt like, okay, the back end infrastructure to support a podcast is there.
Yep.
Now I'm going to get on the mic and start talking to people.
Yeah, pretty much. I even started with my own circle. I still remember the first episode with, I believe was either with Negruso, or I think it was also with Big Evil Beard, Stuart Clark, and John Capel. So I started with the people who I know, and just kind of reach out and say, hey, Nick, I know it's just going to be like 2 listeners, but if you don't mind, help me kickstart it. And they were kind enough to do that. And I miss Nick. Like going back into the path. I want to say, like I don't want to get too emotional, so I will stop there. But I want to say that looking back in the journey, it brings back all these memories and all these kind people and standouts from the community. And yeah, Nick was one of them for sure.
I mean, you mentioning Nick Russo and talking about wanting to document sort of this technology and also the people involved in their journeys involved, the fact that you have now a conversation with Nick preserved, if folks want to, sort of experience him again, that's the value beyond just the education you're providing and the community support you're providing that something like Network Automation Nerds brings to the community, I think.
Yeah, I want to highlight his journey, right? Like, because he was such a special person who, did a lot for the community. So I wanted to ask him the why. I know the how, and I was like, and a lot. So people don't know this, right? Like, so afterwards, he actually we chatted before we turned on the recording, and we chatted after, almost at the same length as the recording itself. And he sent me a picture of, like, he took his daughters were like, playing around his feet while we were recording, because, like, I guess daycare was closed that day. So a lot of these, like, went around, and I really enjoyed that part of it. I wish I documented those as well. And and I thought about, like, going back to his website. So actually, his domains actually got taken down. So now I have to go to like the Wayback Machine in order to get like some of the PCAP captures, which is okay, but it just kind of bring back all these memories. And I hope I capture some of this, right? Like, I hope I capture some of these nice things that like Nick did, and the why, and his mindset, and for all of my other guests as well, right? So that's why I always start with what brings you here. And I remember one of the feedback for the Ansible episode was, hey, I tuned in to listen to Ansible, and the guy talked about like his journey for the first 30 minutes. And I'm sorry about that. Like, I think it was my fault, right? Like, I actually directed the conversation toward that way, because that was my bias, my personal, preference. So yeah, the podcast kind of shaped after my ideology.
Yeah. How would you say that you feel like has anything about the podcast changed as you've been doing it over 100 episodes?
I don't know.
Your approach, your style, how
Yeah,
much you emphasize learning versus a journey versus personal stories and so on.
yeah. I think it hasn't changed the fact about the personal journey part, because I still do very much think the mindset is the key.
Mm-hmm.
But I changed a little bit on the representation. So there was a time when I looked back and I saw, hey, you know what? It's all like Asian and white people, white male on the show, myself included. So I got to go diversify, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
started, and it's interesting because throughout my career, my mentor twice at Microsoft was female. Monica,
Mm-hmm.
she was on the show. The person who hired me, who gave me an opportunity even when I was a junior engineer at Amazon, was a female as well. And I worked on her team for over, gosh, I would say a year and a half. And then then we have directors who were female and so on. So I think the representation was there in the
Mm-hmm.
industry more and more, but I wasn't capturing it. So for one was just to have more even balance of the representation. So you could see kind of that change during the process.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, and I want to, taking the feedback again from the Ansible episode, right? Like I actually scale back on the personal approach and make sure we have like a theme, a central theme for the episode. If whether that's a project, we spend more time on it and go deeper into that project
Mm-hmm.
versus, like the person said, 30 minutes into like education background and like how the approach that you took.
Right.
But I wanted, because Drew, that you've together all in, you've done hundreds of podcasts, right? So have you like, is there any noticeable turning point that you kind of change your approach, or it was any deliberate thing that you wanted to make happen and you did that with?
I feel like I started podcasting with Greg Farrow,
Yep.
who longtime listeners of Packet Pushers might be familiar with, and a fantastic person, but also someone who will tell you what he thinks.
Yep.
And so his feedback to me was very clear and direct, sort of liven up a little bit, have a little more fun. Don't be afraid to have an argument, because my personality is more like just sort of quiet, sitting in the background. So I had to, I mean, one, just obviously getting on the mic and talking to people who are 10,000 times smarter than me is intimidating. So having to get over that and just feel like, all right, I can ask questions. And then two, trying to bring a little bit more of my personality uh, outside of, being shy and quiet and reclusive into a show. So that's something I'm continuously working on. You also mentioned diversity. That's definitely something that Packet Pushers needs to do a better job of as well. And I'm glad you brought it up. And we're trying, but we can also do more. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on, and we need to hold ourselves accountable for that.
Yeah, I think that's the whole industry needs to do better. Wouldn't you say? Like,
Yeah,
yeah. Because
it's
I
true.
was watching the documentary for Python, and I'll include that link in the show notes, which was a great documentary. It's very professionally done.
Wait, so there
On
is a documentary made by documentarians about Python?
yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, so like the whole thing about how Guido started, in the I believe the Netherlands, in the research facility and institute, and how it wasn't brand new, because Guido actually spent some time on doing like this language called ABC, which was
Mhm.
like the precursor of Python, and then he got transferred to another team where he has to do a lot of coding, and he was like, okay, what if we could just take all the things we learned from ABC and whatever project he was on, but I'll leave that to the documentary. But anyway, so there was a documentary on
Python.
Python,
Mhm.
and Guido, in I think it was 2012, 2013, he actually went on stage and said, we need more like core developers for Python. And I will personally mentor the person if that's what it takes. And so I think that just speaks to, kind of how the industry needs to do better. And for those of us who, kind of have a voice there, and if we were just be aware of it, that actually counts as well. So we'll see if that pans out. But I definitely think that the whole industry needs to be better, and it takes all of us to do that. And I want to also point out in the chat that Ioannis said forgot about Nick and he misses Nick too. Yeah, I think that speaks for a lot of us who did
Yeah,
that.
just so folks understand, Eric, you had invited people to come along to this recording, and Ioannis raised his hand, and so he's here, and he's firing some messages into our chat as we're recording. So you may hear us break in with some commentary from Ioannis as we're going.
Yep. Thanks, Yuan, for being here. Shout out to you. You're always a great friend of the show, great friend of the community. Really, truly appreciate you as a person, and also on the personal level. Thank you for being here.
So you've been recording since 2021, Network Automation Nerds. Do you feel like the network automation landscape has changed in those? Is it 4 years?
Yeah, I think this is yes and no. I don't. I like to get your thoughts on that as well, right? Like, I'm not the one who's doing a weekly show that has like all the breakout news, and the more I think about it, it's that there are certain aspect of the technology landscape is the same, right? Like, the basic never changed, and the fact that people want better, faster connectivity, more ease for lesser the landscape and less time to get to the result that they want. I think those basic items never changed. So the technology that fits those mold, for example, we just see a better and faster Ethernet, and we have all these newer features that's going to be to the Ethernet, just bigger, better, faster. I think those never changed. But at the same time, I also saw changes in the mindset and perception for automation and network automation in general. So, for example, we saw the kind of expansion from Cisco on going full into like the DevNet stuff, the automation, and legitimize the automation concept and say this is something that network professionals have a path toward. So that has changed. And I also think one of the changes that I saw was this more full cycle of projects. So when we were when I was first started to dive more deeper into the various projects, most of those projects were on the newer side. Like, it was just usually some engineers who started the project, or some engineers who started some code base that's in the company, and then they open source it. So they're all kind of on the newer side. But as time progressed, you see the maturation of the code base. You see some of the projects that bubble up, and some of the other projects gets abandoned because of lack of usage, or they transfer into like the Linux Foundation. Or so like you see more full cycles that company gets started, get bought out, or they went under, and then some of the companies were successfully into maybe IPOs or so. So I think that full cycle of the life cycle of companies and projects, and even professional development of engineers, I think those, just because of the time and progresses, that those are the changes that I saw. Was just we saw more examples of representation of different stages of companies and projects, so that if I were starting a project today, I could see the exit for which one I want, and I could always find an example out of it, as opposed to before, where if I start a project, I don't really know, right? Like, if I wanted to be bought out by Cisco, I didn't know any company that was like startups or successful projects that would get merged. Or if I want to go IPO, there were not a lot of company that I saw were IPOing. So I see more of that. It's just I would say the natural life cycle, and I'm curious on your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I want to understand, you feel like the market is more receptive to a network automation product. They think that there's money to be had there. So there's more venture capital behind folks with ideas about, I can build this tool, or I can start with open source and then try to turn it into something else. Is that the idea?
I think so. And I think, I don't remember, but I want to say Gartner didn't have a like a network automation, maybe either a hype cycle or a quadrant that they had back when I started, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
they had, it's just that I wasn't aware of. But at least there's more attention to the space. Certainly more companies, for example, or just the adjacent markets. Like for example, like Sonic back then. I know for a
Mm-hmm.
fact that it was just like a garage project over at Microsoft, right? But now it
Right.
has actually matured into an ecosystem where, of course, you got Microsoft, but it's also under Linux Foundation, so it's a lot of contribution from other companies, and we have companies that actually a startup that spin out uh, you know, from that movement and focus directly on Sonic and like a NOS, open source NOS, or community based NOS, and so on and so forth. So I think to me that actually has changed, or that's just this time frame of me looking into the industry. So that tide actually lift all boats. So that means Gartner now has pays more attention to it. I have
Yeah.
more guests to choose from. You have more news to report on your
It's
weekly
true.
breakouts, and so I think that's the change that I saw in general. And I don't know if you agree, you disagree, or you have different perspective on that.
From my perspective, kind of as an observer of the network and IT market, is I feel like when VMware really popularized virtualization,
Hmm.
and suddenly server teams could have an app stood up in minutes, but the network, it was going to be 2 weeks. That started to really apply some pressure to network engineers and the networking industry, the vendors, tool developers, and so on. Then we saw, the emergence of software-defined networking (SDN), which is, to my mind, was sort of a serious initiative at being able to move networking from the CLI to a more software-driven uh, movement. And it didn't really take off, but I think the legacy of SDN is that mindset started to make its way into the industry and into the minds of network engineers and thinkers and people creating new tools and trying to drive this process forward. Also, public cloud. When the business can see that AWS can, get your network set up with a few keyboard commands and have that provisioned and running and operating, it's like, well, why can't we do that? Again, more pressure on networking to try to catch up and keep up with the pace of the app and infrastructure side. And I think, the industry sort of tried with like, okay, well, can we use Chef and Puppet on the networking side? And that didn't work. But so we needed to like have a more network specific ecosystem emerge. And now we're starting to see that emerge.
Yeah.
And now it's about, sort of education and skilling up and preaching to the business that you need to support network automation. You need to be willing to forgive, mistakes that happen along the way as you start to move into automation, because it is a high risk endeavor potentially. Um, but that's sort of my off the top of my head look at
Yeah,
how
I
the
agree.
space has evolved.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. So I think the acceleration of technology kind of moved the bottlenecks in different areas, right? So at one point, it was the hypervisor that, as you mentioned, popularized by both commercial and like Zen and KVM, or some other hypervisors that kind of move that bottleneck into compute. And once they solve that, then it's like storage, right? Like, okay, now we have storage as a bottleneck, or block
Mm-hmm.
storage, or any kind of persistent storage. And then at some point, it moved to networking, and people gets impatient, especially people like you said, who are quote unquote cloud native, that are
Right.
sort of impatient and be like, what is this crap, right? That I have to wait. Like, what do you mean I have to cut tickets and wait for human beings to intervene? So that kind of mindset actually transfer into a direct pressure, and I think the industry adapt and became better out of it. And I also want to point out what Ioannis had pointed out in the chat. It's like different scale in the markets on different continent. That's something that we, both of us, are US based, that are probably not as in touch with that, like the EU market, the APAC market. I got a little bit of taste of that since I go back to Taiwan every year. And,
Mm-hmm.
since I published the book and, kind of went to PyCon Taiwan and kind of observed the market size. Yeah, definitely different, definitely interesting on seeing some of the differences in the scale and the markets. And I don't know, because I wanted to go to AutoCon 3, but there was like this thing that in my schedule that I couldn't move. So, but I don't know what your thoughts on great Drew, because you and Ethan actually went to Prague for AutoCon 3. How did you compare that with AutoCon 2 and AutoCon 3, just from your conversation with the local people over there? And thank you, Ioannis, for pointing that out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Ioannis also mentioned, the emergence of data models.
Yep.
So and things like APIs and so on that actually make it so that you can programmatically touch all of these systems that you need to interact with to actually get into automation. That's some other things I think we needed to mention about the evolution of network automation. But I feel like you can see that AutoCon is growing in terms of attendance, in terms of the topics they're covering. You can see, workshops filling up almost immediately for folks hungry for learning.
Right.
So it feels like, if AutoCon is the tip of the spear, like it's definitely on an upward trajectory, and I hope it continues that way.
Makes all of our jobs a little bit easier. It's like
it certainly makes it more exciting.
Yeah, make it more exciting, and it just like this, they provide this space for people to go, and I'm so glad people showed up, right? Because there's a lot of times where you provide the space, and for one reason or another, like it just crickets, and so there's only so much we could control. But in this time, actually, I think all the stars aligned, and looking from AutoCon 0 to AutoCon 3 and now 4 coming up, it's just amazing how the community has grown and come together.
Yeah, it's been a perfect vehicle to get folks who are interested in this or want to get better at it to come together, and that's the sort of organizing principle we needed. But we're here to talk about your podcast, Eric. So I want to bring it back to you.
How did we get to that? That's like no, but that is
the podcaster's curse, right? You go down.
Yeah, that's the story of the podcast. We always go on tangents, and those actually end up being the more interesting conversation. Yeah, people don't want to hear me yab, but come on now. they're tuning for the guest.
Well, I think you're wrong about that, but we can debate that later. But
okay.
When you started, did you have a number in your head of, I want to get to this many episodes, or I want to do it for, 6 months, a year? Or did you just think, let's see where this goes?
Yeah, I always wanted, there's a number, it's always 1. I just want to get over to the next one. It's like almost like tears down my eyes.
It's an increment of whatever the last one was, as your number.
Exactly. It's always +1. But that is the truth, right? I mean, I'll fully disclose that at one time I thought about giving up, and this is a great point in leading into like why move to packet pushers. But I'll finish my thought first. Is that I have so many projects on my hand, right? Like people know me as the author as well. So I've written 6 books, and a lot of people don't know I even translated my book into Chinese because I wanted to see it in my the country the place that I grew up in, right? And I want my mom to see in so like I have all these projects that I self-published the book. And so writing has always been a big part of me. I have a family of 4 that I need a full-time job and insurance and all of that, right? And at the same time, during the time frame, I also went back to school, got my master's. So all of these are competing with the time. And I almost, like 3 months into me went back to University of Washington getting my master's, I seriously considered just shutting it down. Maybe not forever, but I wanted to take a break, at least until the degree was over. And I talked to my professor, and so we sat down, and she asked me about my motivation. I told her, and nothing's changed, right? At that time, what changed was my time and my kind of circumstances. But none of the other factors that we talked about changed. I still wanted to have more representation. I still wanted to dig deeper into people's background and stories. I would still want to share those. So I think what we ended up doing was just, she suggested, which correctly was just to shorten up the recording time frame to kind of get through this challenging time for me. So we ended up, there was a period of time where we record 1 hour, but I cut the episode into 2 halves, so 30-minute each. So that prolong it, which takes a lot less time, not 0, but certainly beats like weekly publication, which was the time at the time, the cadence. So bi-weekly and then shorten each episode into just 30 minutes so that you have like part 1 and part 2, and just to keep it going, because as you know, Drew, right? Like once you lose the listeners' regular, cadence, that's very hard to get back.
It is,
And
yeah.
yeah, so that's why I try to do, and so that actually got me through that 1 year, and now we're back into a regular cadence, enjoying packet pushers to listen up, some of the I don't want to say busy work, but just work that needs to be done, but different from it's like me making dinner in my kitchen, right? And then with restaurants making it, like they have the scale, they have the know-how, and then the kind of the assembly line to have that workflow done, versus me,
Yes.
having to cut the carrots and peel the potatoes every single time.
Right. Or go to the market and buy the vegetables.
Exactly. So yeah. So back to that question was, I didn't have a set schedule or set time. I always wanted to just get over it, get over the next one, make sure that's the best I could present at that time. And yeah, that's in short, that's what it was. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that as well. Did you know that you were going to do this for 10 years when you started?
I did not. And when I first started being on Packet Pushers, I had a different job. I was working for the events company Interop, helping to put together the technical tracks for the show, and do a network break with Greg was just kind of like a fun thing I did, because I loved Greg and Ethan and thought they were a lot of fun, and I was just happy to be on the podcast. And then I got laid off, and then Packet Pushers picked me up. But yeah, I never thought I would be in podcasting. I have to say though, for me, it's a job. So this is what I get paid to do. You have a full-time job and a family, and you also write books and teach classes and do a million other things. So the fact that you can pull off a podcast on top of that, I think, is incredibly impressive, and just a testament to your work ethic.
And don't forget, I chickened out for 4 years, right? So during
well,
those
let's
4
say
years,
you were warming up.
Yeah, I was warming up. I was just a slow start, right? Like that, when you put the key in. Hello, here's something that will resonate with network engineers everywhere. You know the frustration, managing networks across multiple sites with different vendors for switching, wireless, and security. When issues arise, you're jumping between multiple dashboards and vendor support team just to figure out what's wrong. It's inefficient, and frankly, there's a better way. Meter took a different approach. They designed their own hardware, write firmware, and build software stacks that gives you full control and visibility. Everything from ISP procurement to security and SD-WAN, all in one integrated stack. Here's what I love. They're not dumping down networking. They know you're problem solvers who want control. Their approach empowers you to be more productive with deeper network insights, whether you're managing branch offices or large campuses. Thanks to Meter for making this possible. Go to meter.com/NAN to book a demo now. That's METER.com/NAN. Now, back to the show.
So why then did you move to Packet Pushers, and how did that process work?
It was excellent. I moved to just so I could, talk to you, Drew and Ethan, right? But, which is partially true. I think it just wasn't, it became unsustainable for me, even with the lesser, even with the shorter, episodes. And, I eventually finished the degree. I was happy. But at that time, I don't think that was the best possible format for the podcast. People, you could see a clear dip when people are, on the part 2 of the episode, where, because when you just think of yourself that when you tune in, I'm speaking to the listeners now, is that when you tune in and you say, oh, this is part 2, I need to go back to part 1. And that little friction of going back to like listening to part 1, that actually create enough friction that people would just abandon the show together. I could choose something else to listen to, right? Like I have 20 backlogs that I need to listen to. Why do I need to, go into the middle? Right. And the cadence of having a biweekly show, and on top of that is, I lose a lot of traction that way. So I knew it wasn't a sustainable model, or like there wasn't just the best I could do. But at the same time, I still have those competing priorities. You mentioned classes. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, you know what? I actually had like a bunch of LinkedIn courses and Pluralsight and Netmaster and all of that, right? So, um, yeah, so I actually was looking forward to other ways that I could gain more traction, sustain more momentum, and yet still make the podcast cool and sustainable that way.
Mhm.
So I looked around, I emailed Ethan on, hey, you know what? Are you guys looking for? Oh, and at the time, I think some of the podcasts on the Packet Pushers platform were wrapping up when I heard. And so when I heard about that, I was like, hey, is there a slot open? And I
Mhm.
believe Network Automation Nerds, if I remember correctly, that was the first show that was created a move and not a homegrown. Was that the first non-homegrown show or like started on the Packet Pushers, or was I mistaken?
I believe it was. We again going back to Greg Farrow, his people would come to us now and then over the years and be like, "Hey, I have a podcast or I want to do a podcast. Can I do it on your network?" And he would
Right.
say, "Go do 10 episodes and then come
Hmm.
back to us,"
Hmm.
because he knew getting over that 10 is a lot of work. And if you could do that, then okay, you were serious about it and committed to it. So when you came over, you'd already had more than 50 under your belt. Plus we knew you, we knew again your work ethic, your reputation in the community. It was a no-brainer for us to be like, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think you were the first non-podcast that started inside Packet Pushers to come on the network.
Yeah, which was great. I think since then there were other podcasts that moved
Yes.
over as well as maybe like a semi kind of in between that that moved over. So, but I just want to say thank you, right? Like I want to say thank you to Ethan and Greg and you for welcoming me in and teaching me a whole lot on just the ins and outs, right? So, we mentioned Greg a few times, and I was fortunate enough to join at a time where I still have access to Greg. Now he's just
Mhm.
vacationing somewhere else, right? And like sipping mai tai, and Greg, I don't think he's, but if he's listening, I just want to say hi and say thank you so much on teaching me about. Uh, people maybe mistaken Greg for always being this like snarky and like
Right.
speak always. There's certain truth in that, but also this is also a persona that he amplified on the show because he know he would make the show better.
Yep.
And he openly admitted that to me on like the things that he did, and he put a lot of thoughts into how to make it better, how to make it more interesting in the short amount of time that people have spent attention spent. So I do want to say thank you for doing this and being so supportive on all the sponsor episodes. You guys never hesitated to help me out, to teach me about how to make a story interesting, even when it's a paid sponsor. So people, please do tune into those. Those are the ones that should I say pay the bills?
I
So
doubt we're paying your bills, but they definitely help pay our bills and put a little bit of extra money in your pocket, which you earn. So,
yeah,
and I
definitely.
just want to
So
note that
yeah.
Ioannis is also jumping in the chat to third that yes, Greg could be controversial.
He could definitely be controversial, but that also makes it interesting, right? And even as he hasn't appeared in the episodes for at least 6 months, that we're still talking about him because that's
Right.
how much of an
That's
impact
his
that he
legacy.
made. Yeah,
Yep,
so
for
that's his
sure.
legacy. So definitely thanks, Janet, for mentioning that.
So obviously, in the things that people don't see going into a podcast are a lot of behind the scenes production work, the hosting, writing up show notes, getting everything pushed out, artwork, all of that stuff. And we're happy to do that for you, Eric. But the other thing that takes probably the most time is finding guests. Has that changed for you over the years?
Yeah, I think it has gotten easier. I think we talked about how the raising tide raises all boats. So the rising tide raises all boats. So as the industry become more mature, more companies coming in, more conferences, and I'm able to find guests that are just like I don't have to go out of my way, right? Like I just read some blog posts or I read Packet Pusher's newsletter, and I get inspiration from that right away. And the industry has never been boring. So what I needed to do was just to not look very far to find the guests, right? Like blog posts, articles, interesting projects, things like Container Lab, right? Like I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
existed a couple years ago, or maybe it existed, it just wasn't mature enough. But hey, just from Container Lab alone, you could talk about the technology, we could talk about the company, like Nokia being able to sponsor the technology and dedicated development power to it, and we could
Mm-hmm.
talk about the business aspect of it, the business model of how do you, I mean, this is free to use, so how do you justify the resources that you're putting in, and all of that surrounding. So I think it's just become easier over the years that it almost now it's to select the right type of guest or the right project to mention on Network Automation Nerds, right? Because we still do want to have a focus. We do want to have the guests that are kind of central to the theme of network automation. At the same time, I think we want to expand out to the adjacent possibilities. So again, back to that journey, it's sort of interesting to me how people from different backgrounds behave differently when they encounter network automation as a topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even even if you say, "Hey, I hate programming," and the reason I became a network engineer was because I didn't like coding.
Right.
Even for people who are like that, but when they talked about when the growing up, they still had a access to computers early on, or they took one programming class, even though they hated it, but they still had the foundation, the basic setup, versus people who were coming in more of a business background and they're always very focused on like the ROIs or
Mm-hmm.
counting the return on whatever time or money investment. I think those are kind of different perspectives. So I think just so interesting to me on these different aspects and picking up the through lines between all of them on this thing called network automation, which is so cool to me. And so to answer your question, it has become easier just
That's good.
because of like the bigger pool, the bigger denominator that we have now.
Do you have any kind of like rubric or algorithm or checklist for what you think would make a good show or a good guest?
I think it's all about the guest. I don't have a set rubric like as far as projects or the type of certainly not age or gender because I think all of those are irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that if the guest have published something or if the guest has done a open source project, interacted with other people, that makes it easier for them to express their idea clearly. Because there are people who and I won't name any names, right? But when I was at Amazon and Microsoft, they are engineers who are brilliant and makes huge impact for many, many different projects. But but they would just like look at their shoes when they talk to you, right? so,
Right.
and so the definition of an extroverted network engineer sometimes when they look at your shoes rather than their own shoes. so so I think, but they're brilliant, right? They're brilliant,
Right.
and they
Right.
have big brains, big personalities. They make big contributions, and when you see their name on the white paper, you're like, man, I gotta read that. But at the same time, the podcast is not the right format for them to
Sure.
express their idea. It's
Mm-hmm.
the patent applications, their white papers that they're able to sit down, think of thoroughly, and so on. So I think there's no set rubric for me to choose, but I do have a bias toward people who have, maybe spoke at AutoCon or maybe they have collaborated on an open source project. So I know they could work with other people and they could express clearly their thinking and their line of work in a clear,
Mm-hmm.
precise manner in such a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So you've talked to a lot of people. Do you have any like memorable behind the scenes stories from interacting with guests or the people you've talked to?
Yeah. So out of all those, right? Like I mean, they're obviously the dogs walk into the room and like maybe not so much of that CNN where like the daughter came in and just
Right,
go
the
whoa
baby
whoa
coming in
yeah,
and
the
yeah.
baby coming in and the wife yanking them out. Some of those are just the given, right? But I
Yeah.
remember one time when I talked to Jaime Botello, and like I was like, okay, I'm gonna do video, right? And so I'm gonna have like an interesting background. Jaime is local, and so we met up at Redmond Town Center. I still remember that. Like we met up over there. I even bought like those equipments where you have like you could like a pin mic on the
Mm-hmm.
shirt. so we set up like GoPro on the side, and then we start talking, and I thought it was going to be great, and nothing could be further from the truth, right? Like it sucked. Like the water fountain was like blurring in the background. We had people walk by and like,
Uh-huh.
just like staring at us like we were just aliens. Like, what are you doing, right? Are you like some kind of YouTuber?
Right.
So it's just like, oh my God, it's like so distracting. And so I like 20-25 minutes in, I find just like, what, let's just go back, right? Like you go back to your home. I go back to my home. I start another Zoom. And so we went back to the good old way of, recording over Zoom. And I don't remember. I think I scratched out all of the previous recording at the physically and just
Mhm.
kept like, or maybe I stitched in together toward the end. I don't remember, but I remember that was just like this failed experiment. And shout out to you, Jaime, for like being a good sport, helping me out. And we are like, what the heck? Like, does this guy even know what he's doing? So that's one memorable interaction. Another is that I won't name any names, right? But I was trying to reach a like this open source project or this the founder of a company, and I mistakenly, for whatever reason, because I was like sleep deprived or maybe I was like stressed out or whatever, and I accidentally typed the same email but to a different founder. So imagine me emailing Juniper about Cisco, right? Like, talking to Nokia and then say, how's Arista doing, right? Something like along that same line of
Uh-huh.
embarrassment.
Uh-huh.
That's me putting my foot in my mouth like times 10, right? And I was so embarrassed, but it turned out the person was such a great, awesome, person and big personality. And he was just like, ha ha, did you realize you talked to Juniper? You asked Juniper about Cisco. And I was just so embarrassed, but I kept to it. I was like, hey, you know what? I was gonna reach out to you anyways, right? So how about be on the show? And you have to guess who that is, but I won't name any names. But yeah, I had a number of founders, so you take your pick. But that was how it went down, one of them, and it was like truly funny. And the company's doing great, by the way. So
Well,
so
it's nice
all the
they saw
power
the
to
humor
him.
in it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was great. So yeah, he's a great CEO.
And it's interesting you mentioned experimenting with video because it seems like that's the way things are going now, where people expect video. And just a heads up, packet pushers are going to try to start doing more video too. So you might, for whatever God knows reason, want to watch us. You will be able to at some point.
Not
But
only they want to watch you, they want to wear your merch and merchant. So I listen to Never Break, right? So I got the humor.
Do you prepare differently now for interviews versus when you first started?
Yeah, when I first started, I didn't really have a set format. I just kind of, did whatever that I wanted to do. I had, planning calls. I didn't do what I should say. I did not have planning calls, kind of just exchange to people. And especially the first few episodes were people who I know, so that, I feel comfortable about like, well, I'm really have them on Slack, or, I even have like on the text message and stuff like that. So I plan it that way. And then gradually after the first, say, 5 episodes, I could just point back and say, hey, if you're interested in, the format, this is usually how it is. And I point them to the
Mm-hmm.
link and so on. So go from there organically. But again, thanks to, you and the Packet Pushers team, you guys already have a workflow, which I just follow, which was excellent, right? It's tried and true
Mm-hmm.
workflow. This is how it should be. And if you want to have a planning call, here's the template.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole team really was instrumental in me developing my own workflow. So obviously, I put my own spins and uh, thoughts into
Yeah, your
it.
own personality into it,
Yeah,
and
my own
yeah.
personality.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think skeleton wise, like I really, appreciate the Packet Pusher team for helping me establish a more of a cadence on, hey, if the show is going to release this time, you should have the recording by then, right? So
Right.
all of that like really helped me out on just delivering the best show possible.
I just want to shout out to our editors because our audio editors are great, and sometimes we don't always give them a decent interval of time to get things out. So again, it's part of the hidden stuff that listeners don't need to worry about. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are working very hard to get all this stuff out. So yeah, it's good to have a
Absolutely.
system. It's good to have a system.
Absolutely. And you don't know how many times we talk over each other that during the recording, but they ended up
Right.
just being so coherent.
The very
And
careful editor.
yeah, I don't even know how they do it, right? Like I would just be like, why they always talk? They clearly have video, and why are they just like, talking over each other? But yeah, kudos and all the props goes to the awesome editors behind the scenes who make these possible.
And just a note from Ioannis, regarding the video thing. Don't worry, we're also still just going to have audio only if that's your preferred consumption method. So.
Yeah, speaking of which, right, like I do think that we all have to like evolve and adapt to and meet listeners to where they are. And I am one of those person, just like you, Jan, that I prefer audio, but I do find myself once in a while that I would, like Diary of a CEO, for example, or the Mel Gibson show, I believe, in the Lenny's podcast. So all of those are by default video now, even though the primary consumption model is still audio. So I do think that's a logical way to go. Is that sometimes I want to listen to 90% of the time that are audio, but there may be like once or twice that I want to see the graph that they have put out, or I know Diary of the CEO, they do a good job on whenever they reference a project, they don't assume that you know it. They have like little, I don't want to say, is it like a sub dialogue or whatever that it is, like
subtitles or
subtitles, but it's
graphics. Yeah.
not a caption. It's more like, hey, if you want to pause the podcast now and go like click the link, come back to it when you have more context and background information, you could do that.
Right.
But obviously that takes like 10x more work on
Right.
the editor's part, on our part. But I do think that's one of the advantage of having maybe like a YouTube video or maybe some other format that complements the audio experience. But like that's part of the reason why it's still audio only on Network Automation Nerds. But I do think that's the next stage and the next evolution phase that we got to go to.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So Eric, maybe for the last question,
Yep.
Ioannis added a question to our doc, and since he's been hanging out with us and not getting a chance to talk, I want to make sure we get to his question. So he wanted to know, do you see an actual clear value for a network engineer learning network automation? Does that translate into opportunities in the job market, or is there still this barrier because HR departments don't know what to look for? And we can get to part 2 after this one.
Yeah, I'm biased, and I won't say yes and a huge yes. Even at my day job.
Yes, you do see a value for learning network automation.
I do. Yeah, I do see a value in learning network automation, and I see less and less friction between HR being a gatekeeper. If anything, it's not HR, it's AI who's like,
Yes.
looking for like that central, like a few keywords, right? So I don't think
Right.
I think there's definitely value in that friction. One might interpret as HR, it's actually AI. So I'll give you like an example, right? Like, when I at one time when I was applying for positions and I applied for this position at Cisco where I thought it was like a clear fit. And like 5 minutes, and I was encouraged by people from DevNet to apply for it. So I applied for it, and we're already in the process of scheduling interviews and like, hey, giving me tips and some of the other stuff. Like we're moving into stage 2, and as we were chatting, I received the rejection letter from Cisco HR like right away, right? 5 minutes into it, and I thought, dude, like I at least wanted a proper explanation on why I'm not the right fit. But that's how it was, right? And obviously they were like, what the heck, right? Like then they went back, they corrected it. I eventually got into the loop. But just to show you my personal experience on that, but to answer that question, I do see a lot of value in learning network automation, and more that translates into like an actual job. I see how much people want referrals to network automation positions at both at Network to Code as well as other companies that I saw or just having regular conversations. So I do think that's the case. What I don't know about is whether there's a difference in the different markets, right? I do think
like US, Europe, Asia, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think at least in Taiwan and in China, that the market's much smaller. And there's also geopolitical stuff, right? I mean, I remember going to Beijing and walking into an ISP, and it's all Huawei, and it's probably mandated by the government, and there's a lot of geopolitical stuff behind it. Or there's a cultural thing, right? When I went to Japan, there's certain regulations and restrictions, import, export, even for a friendly countries like Japan, that I remember at the time the company I was with, like I can't move one data center switch from here to here, even though they're like on the cage right next to each other, because they belong to different legal entities. So that's actually officially asset transfer. Like, so I can't like, even though I want to RMA takes 2 days, that I can't replace it here. So I think there's so much other things that that we perceived as maybe a skill gap, but it's really a something bigger than that. So I know I'm going on tangent here, but to answer that original question, yes, I do think there's a value in learning automation, network automation, and it does translate into actual job opportunity. What I don't know about, right, is I don't know if that's going to be the same case with AI and all these other, technologies that are on the horizon, vibe coding, if you will. And so I don't know about that part, but I do think that skill set, as far as I could see, still valuable, still translate to job market. I don't know. I mean, Drew, you're the one who's doing these updates on every week on, like the network mergers and vendor acquisitions and what nowadays almost like daily or weekly CVE. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Same question to you.
I mean, just being involved with the Network Automation Forum and the AutoCon conference, just feeling the energy there, and also just in the broader market, all of the development around tools and capabilities, and just the need for networking as a discipline, again, to keep pace with the other infrastructure teams. It feels like this does need to happen, and there are lots of opportunities. And I think it's a nascent enough space that if you've got the time and the ambition to skill up, you can really, carve your own destiny here. So I do think there's a lot. For AI and all that, I don't know. I assume AI is going to be with us. My hope is that what it does is help augment us and not replace us, but that's TBD.
Yeah. Yeah. Enhance but not replace. Right. Like I
Yeah.
think as I've been heads down, tried to learn AI, tried to, you know, uh, form my own opinion about it, I think that's the number one thing that's on my list, is that my guiding North Star is that it has to be enhanced and not replaced. And that's a personal bias. I know companies who are, trying to quote unquote reimagine or, do these other stuff that gear toward replacement. But for me personally, I would never hop on that train. My number one thing is always just enhance and not replace. And that goes directly into the tools I selected. So there are tools out there that hides all the AI thinking in the background. That doesn't enhance you, right? Like that just kind of hijacks your brain. And there are other tools that actually give you the option of looking into what the AI response were and the why, right? So they may have it in like a grayed out and hidden that give you the final result, but you have the option of dropping it down and say, oh, that's why, like I gave you this prompt and that's why AI was using this as a part of the reasoning, or giving me that reason, and here's the thought process, and here are the things that they tried didn't work, and now that this one was working, and do you want to proceed, right? Do you want to revert to like certain points? So those are the tool that because of that principle of enhance not replace, that directly goes into, I want to learn about like the transparency of that tool, and that directly goes into the tool that I pick. So I think I don't know if that's going on too much of a tangent, but that's how I see myself as being. How am I going to participate in this world that we're living in, that we could foreseeable future that AI is going to be with us? So I'm trying to form like maybe 2 or 3 different my North Stars, and enhance my replace is definitely on the top.
Okay, that's good. Is that something you're going to be talking about in subsequent episodes, you think?
You bet I will. And hopefully you'll be there as well, Drew. So we got a few project that we're working on, and hopefully we could announce to the world soon. And yeah, so I do think that's something that I want to first form my opinion, then make myself with data that I could back it up and actual concrete suggestions to the people who are willing to listen on this guided tour of AI and shorten up the learning curve, right? Like for me, writing has always been to show people where I bump my head, where I run into trouble, and here's the scars and the blood and sweats, and that you don't have to, right? Like,
right.
So I want to do the same thing for the listeners in the AI realm. It's just like I'm just running out of time, man. Like AI is moving so fast. It's like I wish, like what Phil Gervasi said, right? Like on the show, I wish I would like everybody just stop for a moment.
Yeah. Right, I
like,
know.
yeah,
Yes.
let me catch up. Let me catch my breath, and then let's all move for like what I'll give you the cue, right? Like go.
Right. I
I
feel
wish
like
that could happen.
kind of just got a grasp of how LLMs work, and now we're talking about agentic AI and model context protocol. And I'm like, hold on, can we have 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'm
To
still
digest
stuck on
this?
prompt engineering. So what is this
Right.
NCP stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
John Capel, please stop.
Yes. Luckily, we have John Capobianco to blaze the trail for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey Drew, I think we're running up on time. I thank you for just being such a great sport. I'm being here. I really appreciate you being here, Ioannis. And I'll do the outro in a minute, but I just want to say heartfelt thank you for the team, for you, and for the community.
Same here, Eric. We are so happy that you're part of the Packet Pushers family-ish entity. You're
Yeah,
definitely like a
that's
jewel in
true.
the crown. It really our honor and our pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thank you, listeners, for listening to this very special episode of Network Automation Nerds. Once again, Drew, thank you for joining me on this retrospective journey and bringing me your unique insights. I know, I probably caught you off guard, but you were such a wonderful and deep knowledge person that you were able to just answer everything, thoroughly with knowledge and thoughtfulness on all the questions. I want to thank you again. And I want to thank you again to the amazing listeners. You really made this journey possible with your feedbacks and stories. Here's really to the next 100th episode, right? I know we talked about maybe there's not a set number, but I'm making a prediction. Like here's to the next 100 episodes. Thank you for listening to Network Automation Nerds. Really, thank you. And if you have any feedbacks, please do give us some feedbacks. Follow us on packetpushers.net/. Follow-ups, and we do want to listen to you, and please do keep those comments and follow us coming because we appreciate it. If you find this episode or other episodes in Network Automation Nerds helpful, please do give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And last but not least, remember that too much network automation will never be enough.